Happy Monday, everybody. It's Monday. It's Yolanda. That means it's time for another episode of Everybody at the Table. It's our 15th episode, and I'm really excited about that because time really does fly when you're having fun. I hope and I do hear from you, many of you who are enjoying the podcast and the conversations we're having. And today's episode is one more of those powerful conversations. It's a reminder that brilliance doesn't skip zip codes, it's just buried under systematic neglect. You all know I am a Chicagoan, ride or die by heart. And so for me, I really want to take a look at the youth in neighborhoods like West Lawndale in Chicago, which is often labeled at risk. Yet, in my mind and in reality, it's overflowing with vision and voice and value. Our guest today is a seasoned social services director with decades of experience walking alongside young people, not just trying to save them, but helping them build their futures, build confidence, and hopefully build their own damn tables. If you care about youth and equity and really the untapped genius that exists in our young people, especially in our inner cities, because often they are viewed as a hopeless group. And in my mind, they are a hopeful group with so much to offer. I'm a product of that. So is the guest today. She's a product of that. So if you care about this genius in overlooked places, this episode is for you. Take a listen. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. It's one of the conversations I've been wanting to have for a long time because I like to say I'm CPS educated from grammar school. I never went to private school. So from elementary school to high school, grew up in the CPS system. And I know that Chicago gets a lot of ire from right wing politicians and things like that because of our amazing President Obama and our forever First Lady Michelle Obama. But we both are products of Chicago public schools. And so for me, the opportunities and the halls I get to travel as well as yourself, I'm like, what? This is the best thing you can happen to you is get somebody scrappy from Chicago and educated through that system. It develops a grit in you that it's unmatched. You can't replicate it, right?
hmm
Not only did you come up through that system, but you went to college, you educated yourself, and you came to give back to that system. Not as a public school teacher, but in the social work that you do. And I admired the hell out of that because so many of us, including me, took those opportunities the way life led us, or either directly decided to go do something different. That as smart as you are, as intelligent as you are, as much as you have to offer, you could have made a lot more money doing some other things. But you made a conscious choice to give yourself back to the community. And so for me, that's just admirable. I look up to you for that. And in some ways, have some guilt around why can I do the same thing? But anyway, so y'all, I'm talking to my dear sister, my friend, my high school muse. She was everything to me growing up from afar. She didn't know it. Our relationship really developed as adults, but I've always watched this girl because she is just a badass. And I admired the hell out of her, Adrienne Johnson. I'm gonna let her introduce herself, and then we'll talk about our conversation of mining the gold mine of inner city youth, particularly Chicago, because I think Chicago is everything, and you don't get anything greater than to come out of Chicago. Adrienne, introduce yourself to the table family.
Yolanda, thank you so much for having me. My name is Adrienne Johnson. I am um, born and raised in Chicago. Like Yolanda said, I am a product of Chicago Public Schools. My first 5 years were I went to Catholic school, and then after that, I went to public school. So I say I'm a product of CPS because all of my years were in CPS. I I think I have a passion for giving back because it's what my mom did. Like she took a bunch of kids everywhere, and I would be like, "Well, can they go?" And my brother would be like, "Well, can they go?" And then she would have, she had two kids, but have a bunch of kids on the bus. So I think that's where that came from, living in community and giving back. But I grew up on the south side of Chicago in Inglewood. West Inglewood is what they call it now. And now I currently live in North Lawndale. So when you look at, and this isn't to glamorize it, but Inglewood and North Lawndale are typically in the top 10. I want to say sometimes well, okay, they in the top five violent communities in Chicago. But I've never felt like in either community where, I could not move how I wanted to move, right? I'm a giver. I love young people. I'm wicked smart. I'm
Absolutely.
pretty. I'm funny. So I'm a triple threat. That's what I say.
She could
I'm
dance,
pretty smart.
y'all. She could
I'm pretty
dance.
smart. I'm pretty smart and funny. So I'm a triple threat in these streets of Chicago. Yeah, that's really kind of who I am.
And while
Yeah,
we didn't cross paths growing up, I grew up in Inglewood. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, well, the east side is what we would call it, right? I grew up in South Shore. But my grandmother, 5726 South Sangamon, is in the heart of Inglewood. And that's where I spent a lot of my youth on the porch there watching the people go by. And it was TikTok before TikTok and social media ever was a thing. We had our own TikTok,
yeah,
just
we
sitting on the
did.
brick porch looking at the goings on of the neighborhood. And one of the things that strikes me, I had a cousin who was brilliant. He just recently passed. Was brilliant. I mean, he went away to the Air Force, substitute teacher. He was a STEM mastermind, but drugs and just the community profile just took him under.
Mm,
All our lives, he was someone to look up to for smarts, but literally all my life, he had a substance abuse problem. And you can
mm-hmm,
see that contradiction of what the community didn't nurture in him fully,
mm-hmm.
right? But the potential that lived in him. And that's kind of the springboard I want to talk about in the conversation because you see this every day. You've given your life, your career to young people in North Lawndale community and greater Chicago community with some of the roles that you served and some of the organizations you've been a part of. And for me, I just think that you get to see so much untapped potential that we have got to learn how to mine,
Mm,
elevate, give opportunity to beyond violence prevention. So, what would you say
absolutely.
is the one thing people misunderstand about North Lawndale and communities like it?
That all the people here are like poor minded,
Yep,
have an impoverished mindset. But really it's not that. I mean, most people who live on the west side, so, just the history when people moved from the south, they moved to the west side, right?
great
And a
migration.
lot of them
Yep,
a lot of them purchased houses, and so it's kind of like it was a pride thing. And then those who, when you moved to the south side, it was almost like you was like a George Jefferson, if you will, right?
right, right.
So my
Moving
grandparents
on
lived
up,
on
but you
the,
move south.
yep, yep, but you moved south and you bought property there,
Correct.
right? So I don't look at it as that. I think people who choose to stay in communities that have challenges, some of them have to stay, but a good majority of them stay because they want to stay,
They choose.
right? They choose to stay. So I am a third generation resident of North Lawndale. My grandparents bought the house that I live in 48.
Wow,
My mother lived here, and then I purchased it after my granddad died, right? So
wow.
I'm a like this, like I got roots here. So it's for me, it's a lot of pride. And
Mm.
so I think what like that message is missed if you will. Like people don't think we stay because we're proud to be here. They think we stay for a number of reasons. We ain't got no
Can't
place
move
else to
out. You
go.
didn't get
We
the
can't
opportunity.
move. We don't have a mindset to move. Like a bunch of silly mess. But you know, a a good majority of people stay because they choose to stay. And when I think about North Lawndale, I live 4 miles from downtown. I live
I know
13,500 west. What?
you are.
Absolutely not.
I did some research, to prepare for this conversation because I know, we know in just driving, it feels like we'll say it's 15 minutes down away, right? So,
Everything 15 minutes.
exactly, everything 15 minutes. And literally, North Lawndale is 6 miles from City Hall.
Yeah.
Set
When I worked downtown, I could get to work in 13 minutes, parked and in the building.
in 13 minutes.
13 minutes.
8 to 9 miles from the Gold Coast is what we call it in Chicago, Michigan Avenue, where the money resides, where the money resides.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking the juxtaposition of, this enormous amount of wealth in dollars compared to this enormous amount of wealth in value and community that bump right up against each other. But then, to your point, the idea and the representation of these communities in the media and even in some of our social construct and conversations don't meet. We don't see them the same. We don't see this group of people 6 miles from all of this, innovation, if you will. I can't even tell you. Well, you know what they've done with the West Loop. Shoot, you bump up against the West Loop, you might as well be the West Loop, right?
Absolutely.
And they're
Yeah.
spreading your way. You know that. I know you get offers all the time to buy your property because they're spreading your way.
I just saw some days jogging on my block just a minute ago. So I just be like, oh, okay. Where you come from? Where you come from?
And when she say days, y'all, to all my white brothers and sisters listening, she is talking about gentrification and 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 some of our European brothers and sisters who normally have avoided this community because they have not seen it as a place they can reside that is safe, that can educate their kids, kind of the conversation that we're talking about. They
Mm-hmm.
have avoided investing in these communities. And largely, I'm not going to put that, I put that somewhat on individuals because adults can read and we can study, we can understand. But a lot of it is the media we consume that tells us, informs us that no, stay away from here. This is bad, right? And
Yeah.
that's the reputation. Like communities like North Lawndale and Inglewood and across the country, communities that great people come from, but we celebrate the ones that get out as an anomaly, as if everybody
Mm-hmm.
left is just incapable
Right.
of
Right.
excelling.
Yeah. And the reality is, so North Lawndale was a Jewish community
Mm,
for like it started as a Jewish community. Some of the churches are huge. They were former temples, right? Because I mean, when you go in them, it's like this place is huge. They were old Jewish temples, right? And so that was the King riots. They moved way, way before that, but then the King riots kind of put the stamp on it because all the businesses that were still here, they burned them down.
I remember as a girl coming from the South Side, coming there to shop, all the stores,
Hmm.
and they were mostly owned by Jewish store owners.
Yeah. So they were throughout, I don't remember it, because we were born in 68, but my mom and my neighbors all said up and down 16th Street. I mean, it's starting to come back a little bit now, but it was full of businesses that were owned by Jewish people,
Mm-hmm.
so they sold their houses, but they kept their businesses here,
Wow.
and so it's like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, I think that's the biggest myth, like we are the people who live in communities that have challenges. We have to live here. We don't. I I don't. I could go anywhere and live. and do
Exactly.
well.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
And you've made the conscious choice. And I say this as someone who moved when I was 21 from Chicago and still has great affinity for the city. In fact, I would love to own some property. I don't want to live there, y'all, because it's cold. And everybody tells me, including Adrian, the winters aren't that bad anymore. I don't care. I don't want the snow, the one day of winter. But like, I would love a condo in the West Loop. That's just my dream. Y'all believe that with me for that. But for those of my like myself, who for the majority of my adult life, my tax paying life, where I've bought property and where I've invested, I've not been in a community that I feel so deeply rooted to, and know that when I extract my potential, I don't just extract, a person to give back to the community. I'm extracting dollars. I'm not spending there
Hmm.
regularly. I'm not paying property taxes in that community, and that all goes toward education and creating opportunity for particularly the youth in this case, in the community. And so I'm going to get to that in a little bit and some thoughts on how you think folks like myself can help out. But that matters, and it matters deeply.
Yeah. So I also, to that point, I also stay, growing up, for me, growing up in West, in Inglewood, West Inglewood, I saw people who went to work every single day, right? Like they weren't
Absolutely.
wealthy or any of those things. So it's important that our kids see that.
And they
It's
owned
a
homes going to work every day. They weren't
yes,
renters. They owned
yes,
these bricks, brownstones, and graystones in our
yep.
communities.
Our house was a frame house, but we owned it.
Right.
So I think that that's important that our kids see and know that that's something to aspire to.
Mm. And I'm going to
Hmm.
pause and sit that, because what our kids see and what many of them dream of is what they see in the social media, which is to be the rapper or the athlete or whatever the quick, fast money is. And they see, I have a whole thought I'm going to do in this podcast. I say every time I get into this that the American dream is a marketing scheme built on debt and on the backs of debt of poor people. Seriously,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we image this idea, and literally, your grandfather, my grandparents, they lived the American dream. They worked hard. They did hard, honest work. They raised
Hmm.
amazing families. They owned
Yep.
property. They went to church. They supported community.
Hmm.
And we have gotten so far away from that. And to your point, we don't image that enough in communities for, you know, young people who are coming up in the inner city. We've retracted the like, I get a family, I got to move out to suburbs because my kids got to go to better schools.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my granddad went to work every single day. He worked construction. He went to work every single day, but he was also the little league coach.
Mm.
And people, when he passed away, it was people, grown men there, looking in my face, talking about, I've known him longer than you. Dude, get out my face before I push you in that hole. Get
Such
out
a
my
black
face.
person thing. You go to a funeral and they start talking about, I remember when's at a black funeral is it's something to behold.
But they were not they were upset and
Because
sad
he touched their
because
lives and he remembered
yes,
that,
he
they
was
remembered
their
that long ago.
coach, right, from a long time ago. And so, you know, when my grandparents would be in community and people would be like, "Oh, Mr. Hudson, oh, Miss Hudson," I would be like, "Who are these people?" But it's because they were active in the community. And it was the norm.
The norm
Hmm.
for them to do that. You made the statement that North Lawndale and Inglewood are in the top 5% of violent communities in the city of Chicago now. All of the
Not top five,
investment,
but top five. Like it's
the top
three.
five,
Yeah, they're one of the five.
they one, two,
They're
three,
one of
four.
the five.
Okay,
Yeah.
one of the five. And then when we go and we ask people, because we've retracted tax dollars from the community through
Hmm.
people leaving and through flight, so we have to go ask donors to give back to these communities. And a lot of those initiatives tend to center around violence prevention, right? It doesn't center
Hmm.
around what you said. It's like your granddad investing the wealth of teamwork through Little League. We want to have conferences about how not to own a gun, right? It almost reminds me of the Reagan era of Nancy Reagan's "Don't Do Drugs" campaign. Like, oh, okay, that you spent millions of dollars telling people not to do drugs. Duh, right? For
Hmm.
you as a leader, as someone who has led organizations in the YMCA, in some of the name some of the organizations that you have led in, but you have met with these donors, you have, you know, done the work of fundraising to bring dollars to help elevate this community. How frustrating is that for you, is that the dollars seem to be centered around more around violence prevention instead of investment into education or programs to help raise the floor for the youth in this community?
So I don't know if it's necessarily um, frustrating because here's what I say: people don't know what they don't know, right?
Okay.
And so I am. My mindset is prevention is an all hands on deck
Explain that.
approach. And
Explain that a
I've
little bit.
said that for 100 years. And so now you'll hear people in Chicago say that, but I've been saying that.
That's the Adrian Johnson
So
quote. Give her
it
credit.
is not just organizations doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Schools have to be involved in
Agreed.
prevention. Businesses have to be involved in prevention. The senior buildings in the community have to be involved in prevention. All of your, your neighbors have to be involved. It's like all hands on deck. Every system, police have to be involved, the fire department, they have to be involved. Like everybody has to have their hand in this space, right?
Yep.
Because my friend Norman explains it like this. So when COVID was happening, we didn't we didn't we didn't we pulled out all the stops for COVID,
Right.
right? So when
Everybody.
they were
Oh, yep.
everybody was on deck because of this pandemic. And when you think about violence, violence is a pandemic.
Hmm.
So we cannot just say, oh, it's just this one thing. Like we all have to have
It's a
our
North
hands.
Lawndale problem, or it's the
It's a
residents' problem.
city
It's
of
the parents'
yeah,
problem.
it's the city of Chicago issue. It is, if violence is happening here in Chicago, that is an issue in Atlanta. If violence is happening in DC, that's an issue. Like we all have to be like tethered to one another so that all like we can just kind of like tap like wrap our arms around it. And like we did with COVID, all the brains came together to figure out what to do next.
Interesting concept and an
No,
analogy. And I say, for me, right, when I look at it as one who was not involved in the work in this space, but just a student of life and culture and community, and I look at it, I always say that what we're seeing in with our young people, it is not just in communities like North Lawndale; it's everywhere because they shooting them up in rural North Tennessee. The way they're
mm-hmm,
doing it, it just doesn't get the attention. It may not happen as often, but when you look at it at scale, it's the same problem in our country. And for me,
yeah,
it's a failure of every institution, to your point, that has contributed to this rise in violence in our communities and not developing our young people, and particularly strategically, and I'm just going to call it out strategically, in our inner cities. And we know why. And we know why, because of the people who look like me and who look like Adrian, who live in those communities, are not seen as valuable resources.
mm,
And we're leaving a gold mine of invention and opportunity in these communities when we do not develop them fully and well rounded. It's a responsibility of the city council, the police, the fire department, the church,
The
the
church,
neighbors, the, everybody, the
everybody.
education system. It's a complete collapse. It's a complete collapse of the infrastructure that
Yeah,
builds community.
exactly. I mean, so when you ask me about philanthropy, I think they do like I think they do have a I'm not going to say a responsibility because they can do whatever they want to do with their money, right? Because for many years philanthropy was like the consistent money, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
And big
recently,
donor money instead of individuals seeing themselves as a part of the philanthropy stream.
yeah, but for many years government funding didn't fund this work. So it
Mm,
was philanthropy. If you hear on the news there are 700 murders in a year, you're alarmed by that. Everybody should be alarmed by that, right?
mm-hmm.
And for them to say, what can we do to help? I think that's I think that's admirable. We should commend them on that. Because I mean, the government wasn't saying it at the time, right?
And
Like the government coming to the table is very new. You need prevention and intervention to do this work, right? You need to be on the front of it with young kids, but then you also need to, continue to hang out with young people until they're like 27.
mm,
Like, so you need to be on the scale from like 5 to 27. And sometimes even older, because older guys are still in the street and they still getting shot, right? But if your focus, if you start at 5, I can take those violence prevention dollars and use them on the prevention side, but I can also use them very differently in an intervention space.
and
So
intervention meaning intervening now that we're at the point of developing of violent behavior and
yep, yep.
action.
So how do we turn you, or not necessarily turn you, but how I I I describe the work that's being done in intervention as you have people who have lived experiences, so very similar experiences to the young people who were out on the street. They were part of street organizations, and right now they're walking out life with young people so that they can become everything that they were created to be, and they don't have to do things so that wind up in the same situations that the person who was walking out life with them.
Well, thanks for listening. That's part one of a powerful conversation that Adrian and I had, talking about young people and how we can support them and the things they need to be supported, and not looking at our young people as needing charity as much as they need infrastructure. They don't need to be invited in, they're already here, waiting for us to aid them. In part two, we go a little deeper into what you and I can do to help close the gap with providing aid any way that we can, whether it's volunteering, whether it's financial support, whether it's giving jobs. What does that look like for you and I? Thanks again for listening. As always, share your feedback, share your comments, subscribe, and share with others to subscribe if you find these conversations valuable. Until next time, thank you as always for listening. Take care and dine well.